Dude, did Oda just tell us that Gungko is actually Luffy's mother? Like, I've been trying to unravel why Gungko more than anyone else is just so important here, and I think this finally explains everything. Because after reading chapter 1151 of One Piece, there was clearly one massive question lingering still, and I think that Gungko is the clear answer. And by the end of this video, you'll realize who Gungko might actually be, why her heritage is so enormously important, and how this possible reveal could just completely change everything that we thought about Luffy and the story overall. Spoilers, I do think that her little obsession with music might be the key to cracking things truly wide open here. But let's first lock in on what we really got here. In chapter 1151 of One Piece, the thing that really caught me, and probably you off guard as well, was when emo-possessed Gungko unleashed her massive Conqueror's Haki Blast. Now this already happened in the last chapter, but we got to see it again, how the Underworld gang all completely reacted to it, and well, I was not expecting Luffy's response here. It wasn't absolute terror or excitement or crazy chaos and confusion. All of those reactions would have honestly been very logical and made a lot of sense, but instead, Luffy felt that blast and essentially went like, oh, I totally understand what's about to happen here. And wouldn't you say that that's really wild? Like, why? Why do you know what's happening, Luffy? Now, one totally reasonable explanation here is that Luffy actually doesn't truly get it. You know, he might be saying, Chopper, I get it now, because of what Chopper was previously saying. He said this kind of in response to Imu's Haki, but that happened while Chopper was explaining the child hostage situation and the dream monsters attacking. So I think it's fair to say that I get it now is actually Luffy cutting Chopper off and by saying, I don't need to hear any more about the situation, let's go. I just need to go defeat that person, they're the real problem here. Kind of like how he responded to Nami's backstory. What really happened specifically doesn't really matter, they're a problem for my friends, so I'll just bury them. However, with that being said, I do think it is a lot more than just that, so hang with me for a second because I want to unravel some truly crazy stuff that kind of left me going down a crazy spiral yesterday. And okay, let's just get into this. I have another video breaking down all the possible reasons for, you know, why Luffy's able to perceive this to begin with, because that has its own crazy implications, but I really wanted to fixate on something that just really clicked here for me and I think is even more important. The craziest, but arguably best reason in my opinion, because what if Luffy is actually recognizing Gunko's Haki here because she is Luffy's mother? He recognizes his mom's Haki and realizes something is up, because some things just click naturally, and while Luffy might not have known he had a dad, subconsciously kids of course remember their mother. So strap in, I'm about to blow your freaking minds. You do see that the video is a bit longer than usual. We're cooking here. We've been so focused on Gunko's apparent connection to Brook that we've all sort of pivoted away from her weird Revolutionary Army vibes and in general out of place nature in this arc. And now that she's been possessed, I have gotten some major deja vu. Now, in case you don't remember, when Gungko was first introduced, a lot of people were quick to point out that her outfit was very similar to the revolutionary ones, you know, with the hat and the goggles, her lack of a saint title, and her almost comically over-the-top way of saying, I am a god, which seems like a bit of a cheap attempt at being a celestial dragon overall. And so before everyone forgot about it with Imo appearing, it's been a very big theory that maybe she's been undercover for or betrayed the Revolutionary Army. At the very least, it would explain why she went to recruit Loki, because he would be in the same spot as her, a person who was promoted to the ranks of God's Knight without being a Celestial by blood. But I actually don't think so anymore. That's probably because I've also been watching the anime recently, but what if we've been looking at all of this completely wrong? What if Gungko wasn't undercover or anything like that? What if she was the original Ginny? Not quite literally, but figuratively. Like, what if Luffy's mother was also kidnapped by the Celestial Dragons, and that is why Gungko is so special? Something about her is destined to be great, and I do think that it's her heritage as a potential D-Clan member. Now, yes, I do get it. This idea is a little bit wild so far, so let me really explain explain the narrative of Gungko being potentially Luffy's mom and how it actually makes a ton of sense. Now, this has its roots originally in an SBS, which is the additional information of volume 78 specifically. And in this question corner, a reader asked Oda a question that essentially boiled down to, where's the mom at? And Oda chose to respond very weirdly, if you ask me. He basically said that in his mind, mothers were the, opposite of adventure because they would hold a character back from experiencing their true self and journey. So when I was looking at Imo possessing Gungko, I kind of couldn't help but wonder, is that it? Is it just really that simple? Like, Luffy's whole story is about freedom and adventure, right? So is his greatest enemy the demon standing before us right now, who is the opposite of his free spirit and being a pirate, his mom, Gungko? Like, could Oda have introduced the idea of Gungko being Luffy's mother all the way back then by implying that his mother will quite literally be used as an antagonist, even if not willingly, of course, in the final big war? And so based on this chapter and based on everything, I went digging, and bro, like, everything I think checks out really well. Based on all of the recent reveals, Gungko would just be, first of all, the perfect age. We do see what appears to be a very young Gungko hanging around someone who is, let's be real, almost certainly Brook in her flashback. Now at this point, Brook is a nice young 90 years old and died when he was about 38. And it seems like Gungko was probably 4 or 5 in that mini flashback we got, and since he wasn't sailing as a pirate at this point, Brook was probably in his 20s or maybe early 30s, right? So with all of that in mind, Gungko would be in her 50s or so right now, which coincidentally, who would have guessed, is a very similar age as Luffy's daddy, Dragon, who's currently 55. And before any of you say that she looks too young to be 50, I mean, look at Shaki, Prime Big Mom, and I mean, heck, even Boa Hancock. All of them look about as beautiful as it gets, and they range from their 30s to their 60s. But also, straight up, she would have been kidnapped at, what, around 30 or 35? Right around when Luffy was born. And so if Imo does have some fun, fancy anti-aging tech or powers, as we see with the Gorosei, she also would look exactly like she did back as a young mother. Now, I already did point out the revolutionary style outfit, but what I didn't cover was her eyes. Because just like the rest of the Monkey D family, Gunko's left eye is a little bit funky. It's not a scar or a tattoo like the others, but her eye being very different lines up really well with Luffy's family symbol of that eye is a little bit messed up, my man. And most importantly, her being Luffy's mother would explain a ton of things about both Garp and Dragon. Why does Garp distance himself and treat the Celestial Dragons poorly despite being a proud Marine? I mean, his daughter-in-law was forcibly taken away from his family, which would have definitely caused his son to become a revolutionary, right? And this is actually a quite old and classic dragon theory you probably know, which is the idea that his wife was taken from him and that's why he hates the government. But now it somehow feels even stronger and more logical than ever before, don't you think? And yes, if I were Dragon and my wife was kidnapped for her heritage, I too would probably hide my son and entrust his safety to my father, the Marine's greatest hero, because it ensures Luffy's safety and would let Dragon hyperfixate on his freedom fighter agenda. I mean, Dragon leaving the Marines and becoming a freedom fighter in response to Gunko's kidnapping would make a ton of sense, and it would also help explain why Dragon was so supportive of Kuma after Ginny was stolen. Both of their story would basically be the same. I mean, Dragon gets it, man. His wife was stolen too. As an army leader, he should just tell Kuma to log in and battle harder for the revolution, but that's just not it. It's deeper, it's kind of personal, and Bonnie is there. It's the same situation as his past, and so of course, he would push Kuma to do whatever he feels is the right thing to do because he'd be no better than his father, who wanted him to stay a Marine despite that very tragic thing that happened to his wife and kids. Anyways, come on, I'm on vacation. I can't take any work calls from the Admiral right now. I just want to relax and play Crystal of Atlan. In case you don't know, this brand new Magic Punk MMO action RPG just officially launched on the Google Play Store, App Store, PlayStation, and PC for all of you elite gamers on my fleet, and it's got intense team battles with stunning and satisfying combat, plus a super refreshing storyline that I've been unraveling the way that Robin deciphers the poneglyphs. I've just been having a blast exploring the 11 classes and all the characters in Crystal of Atlan, and since it has no character gacha, I've just been able to kick my feet up and relax like Garp before God Valley. Right now, I've actually been trying out the new fighter class because it kind of reminds me of all my favorite anime characters who use their fists to settle their problems, but I might try out the puppeteer class next because all this new stuff with Emo and Elbaf kind of reminds me how cool it is, you know, to control people remotely like the vessels they are. And get this, dude, Crystal of Atlan is crossing over with one of my favorite anime franchises of all time. Crystal of Atlan also participated in the Summer Game Fest, and the official crossover trailer was revealed on SGF9 Live. Oh my god, okay, that's actually really cool. I really like the animation of this. This is... Yo! No way! Alright. Okay, I really, okay, this looks so good. I can't wait. That's right, in the first major update for Crystal of Atlan, they're crossing over with nothing other than One Punch Man. More information will be revealed in late June, and I could not be more excited for none other than the caped Baldy himself. There's some really cool free rewards available for the official launch, so redeem the code COA Team Up 528 and download and play Crystal of Atlan today. Link in the description below. Now, the Gungko theory is just gonna get even crazier from here, but for now, I do actually really quickly want to hop over to another theory because it does boost the claim that Gungko may even be another D-Clan member here. You probably know that I love to talk about how I think that Roger had this big plan for creating the next Joy Boy by putting his crew across the Grand Line, yada yada, so they could basically mentor the next Warrior of Liberation to becoming Pirate King. And we also know that Shanks didn't intend for Luffy to have the Nika fruit originally, and I've been theorizing this for years that it was basically supposed to be for Ace. I mean, his captain's son, a kid who also grew up on the same island as Luffy. If that were to be true, I think this could be why Roger did marry Portgas D. Rouge, another member of the D-Clan, on purpose. But clearly, of course, none of this ended up happening, and Luffy was the one who just took the fruit and ate it himself. And if all of that were to be true, which I really think it is, there would be a necessity for Luffy to be a double D member, a D-Clan member on both sides. A lot of D, basically, yeah. So his mother, who I think is Gungko here, being a D-Clan member possessed by Emu would be quite necessary for the plot. Personally, I do think that this has something to do with the half moon line in the Harley text referring to the D, since it does look like a half moon symbol, right? So maybe the way to truly unlock a big power, a power that not everyone has, is being the child of not just one, but two half moons, symbolically becoming a full moon. Getting, right? Yeah, we probably, yeah, had the graphic on screen. Nice, good job, editors. Now, I mean, it also just makes sense that Luffy's mother would be special, right? When you consider how their family tree is laid out. Luffy's a D-Clan member and the next sun god. His dad is the #1 public enemy, the most wanted person in the world, and his grandpa is the greatest marine. And with all of that in mind, logically, it just makes sense that his mother is gonna be someone really special too. So what if she's a descendant of another branch of the D-Clan and Emu kidnapped her for exactly that reason, as a way to try and prevent two D-Clan members from having a kid? Because if Emu knew that Dragon and her were together, the chance that she gives birth to Luffy could undo her crazy powers. Now, I do think it's important to mention here that, of course, none of this is officially confirmed, but I hope you agree that it does, you know, build a really solid narrative that feels like it could absolutely be true. I mean, a narrative that, coincidentally enough, is kicked off during the very same chapter that Dragon finally makes his move on Mariejua. There could be a little bit of a fun twist of fate going on where Emu possesses Gungko when Dragon makes his move, almost as a big fuck you to him. You know, kind of like, hey, you think you can just go and raid my godly kingdom? Go ahead, man. Remember, I use your wife as my personal vessel, and that's pretty dark and funny if that's true. And honestly, God, that would be so petty, but also funny if that were to be true. Like, funny in a dark and twisted way, you know, but funny nonetheless. All right, so I do hope you can see at this point why I think it's possible that Gungko is and fits the role as Luffy's mother, but why would that even make such a difference? difference. And how does all of this tie into her relationship with Brook? Well, as I hinted at a bit earlier, I do think that Gunko's clan might really be important, and her dynamic with Brook will help clear that up in the coming chapters, but I also think it's way more important for the final war because specifically of the Revolutionary Army. Remember, Dragon raiding Mariejua right now could be much more personal than we all ever thought. I mean, sure, he is lighting the true fire of the revolution and staging an all-out war now, but his greatest motive could straight up be freeing Gungko. Because we still have no idea why Dragon is actually so hell-bent on freedom, and I do think it could just be as simple as that. He doesn't want anyone to suffer the same fate that his family has, something that was out of his control due to his D-clan heritage, especially if him and his wife being two D-clan members is what originally caused Imu to want to intervene and kidnap Gungko. And in turn, of course, if Gungko is also a member of the D-clan like her husband, Oda could use these reveals to explain the actual nature of this mysterious family heritage, the initial in general, or at the very least, we'll get some sort of big hint at another branch of it, the branch that Gungko would be from. On top of that, it would of course also help Luffy and Bonnie's relationship, as they're already two peas in a pod with the eating and the revolutionary parents, but they also are the two people who've used the Nika form to whoop some Gorosei butt, remember? So why not toss "my mom was actually kidnapped by the Celestial Dragons too" into the mix as well? It's just that Luffy's mom wasn't kidnapped by a Celestial Dragon, but the Celestial Dragon on top, Big Emu. But again, why kidnap Gungko specifically? Well, as I said, she has got to be special in some way, shape, or form, right? There's no other reason that Emu would use Gungko other than something bigger going on here. Oda isn't just the type of guy to go, "Yeah, Emu, I just used a random person for this," because, typically when the world government goes after someone, it's to break them or break the people around them. They did it with Kuma because he was a buccaneer, and I think it's gonna be the very same way for Gungko. I believe that it's something with her powers, her name, and her family that can potentially even threaten Emu and maybe even reverse and undo the Domi Reversi. And so Emu's safest play was to take over and mind erase the only living person with, the ability to undo it. Now, she might not be, but it could really help raise the stakes for getting Gungko back on top of everything else we've already gotten. So that raises another question: what power could that be? And I like to believe that it's Oda's favorite, the power of music, and even more specifically, the power of Binks. Now, this is where Gunko's tie to Brook really comes into play. If you missed some of my recent videos, let me quickly explain here. Brook definitely seems to be a Celestial Dragon, or even potentially a former Holy Knight. At least that's kind of what Oda wants us to believe at this point. His sword fighting style, the way he holds himself and dresses and talks, and especially the fact that he just somehow knows about the Holy Knight seems to imply that he is much more important to the story than we all ever thought possible. And now he's been suddenly framed as having history with the person Emu chose as their personal vessel. Like, why? Why make Brook the key to everything here? And to me, I would say it's clear that it is his role on the crew, his music, something that is the backbone of his relationship with Gungko, who may just very well be Brook's daughter, or at least adopted daughter or something. Let's face it, Gungko, Brook, and Luffy all have some really interesting threads that tie them all together, and well, it also does help that Gungko quite literally screamed "father" in reference to Brook, which would explain why Gungko loves Brook's music as a child and even after she was brainwashed. And I'm sure it's finally hitting you as well, because yeah, I think that Gungko is Luffy's mom, she's Brook's daughter, and subsequently that would make Brook Luffy's grandfather, which makes Luffy's whole reason for recruiting Brook hit like 100 times harder. I mean, it is because he wanted a musician and felt it was one of the single most important roles on the crew. But if that is the case, it might be because the inherited will of his mother's bloodline is that of the great musician Binks. Now, I haven't fully touched on it yet, but yes, I do think that Brook and Gungko could be descendants descendants of Binks, the man who wrote the legendary pirate song Binks Sake. And I do know that it's a little bit of a silly point to bring up, but this also ties a little bit into film Red, where the big bad thing was music. The world government was super threatened by the power of Uta's music, and it's also the movie where we got a big reveal about the figurelands and Shanks' true heritage. And I do wonder if Oda chose to do this because music would be slowly revealed to be way more important as the series went on, which is exactly what's happening. Back to the main point here though. All three of them, Luffy, Brook, and Gungko, have another tie as well, because both Luffy and Brook had their shadows stolen during Thriller Bark, an arc that is eerily similar to this current Elbaf situation. And it seems clear to me that Oda used Moria to set up the idea of the Domi Reversi and chose to use Brook and Luffy to show exactly that. Shadow Asgard, Moria's ultimate power of soul possession, just seems to be the appetizer to Domi Reversi's entree. And so with all of that being said, isn't it a little bit of a wild turn of events that Gungko, who I believe is related to Luffy and to Brook, was now possessed to show off the true power of Imu's mind control and body control? Like, it's almost like Oda wants us to look back and see a tie between soul manipulation and Brook, Luffy, and Gungko specifically. Speaking of soul manipulation, turns out that quite literally is Brook's power. I mean, the musician who can manipulate someone's core, the Soul King Brook. I've theorized this last week that this power could just end up being what cuts through Imu's mind control powers, and I'm even more confident after delving deeper into this theory this week. And really, Brook has been a little bit sussy baka the entire time when you look back at it, especially when you look at it through the lens of his similarities with Luffy. I mean, Brook and Luffy both can magically heal when they drink milk, right? The only two characters we've seen do that, and the two just were locked in on each other basically from day one. And since I'm talking about both of them potentially being family, it does raise a super fun point about Brook's character arc, because he wants to reunite with family by finding Laboon, but wouldn't it be very ironic that Brook had actually found his grandson Luffy without even realizing it, and that together they would reunite with their mutual buddy Laboon, and now of course Gungko as well. And it would be a beautiful turn of events actually, and I just really love this idea for no reason. Like, sorry to all of you Rocks is Luffy's grandpa believers, but Grandpappy Brook crushes that plotline. But hey, maybe we can still find a way to work it and all of Luffy's grandparents can be epic old dudes. I don't know. I must admit, the reason that Brook being Luffy's grandfather would make so much sense to me though really centers around the ultimate connecting piece, Binks Sake. It's Roger's favorite song, Shanks' favorite song, Luffy's favorite song, and yes, of course, Brook's favorite song who first introduces us to it. Binks Sake is the song that unites them and the generations, and I'm starting to think it actually unites the generations of a single family. But what family could I be talking about here? But I do think that the focus that Oda has on music right now could hint that Brook and Gungko are descendants of the D-Clan's musician. Assuming that the D-Clan or Half Moon people were all members of Joy Boy's crew, there would be a branch that was descended from a musician, right? And it's not too crazy to believe that another D-Clan family ended up with the Celestial Dragons, as we've seen it already happen. Because remember, the Nefertari family is also a D-Clan member and Celestial Dragon. So it wouldn't be too crazy to hear that another member of the D-Clan was part of the Tenyubito, and it's the family that Brook comes from. Really, the only explanation I can think of that this might not work is because Gungko isn't referred to as Saint Gungko, but I will say, if Brook left the Celestial Dragons and was the last of his clan, then Gungko having her title revoked the same way that Dofi and Shanks would just make a lot of sense, don't you think? And of course, all of this then builds up to reveal my true theory here, which is that Gungko, Brook, and Luffy are all part of the same clan as Binks, who I believe was probably the musician on Joy Boy's crew. And his song, Binks Sake, could be what ends up breaking or preventing the Domi Reversi from Imu. Now don't get me wrong here, I do still think there is a good chance that Binks just straight up is Joy Boy. I've always kind of liked this idea, and honestly, I still think it would work with this theory as well. If Brook and Gungko are actually the descendants of Joy Boy, or Binks if they're separate, it creates an even deeper tie for Luffy, the D-Clan, and inherited will throughout the past. If Gungko is Luffy's mother and she comes from the musician's family, it would make so much sense for Luffy to just naturally think that the musician is the most important role on the crew. It's kind of part of his heritage. It's a weird section of his inherited will. Now, you might remember that one of my favorite theories I have is the one I did on Binks, where I cracked the hidden code in it and deciphered how much it seems to just parallel and explain the story of Joy Boy, the Void Century, and the mural and Harley text altogether. But it also points at the future of the series and possibly even deeper into the Nika lore. And so it would just be insanely fitting for Brook and his daughter to descend from the man who wrote this very important song, especially again if Gungko is Luffy's mom, because it would directly tie him to the song that shaped everyone before him. And yes, in case you've been wondering, Afro Luffy could have actually been foreshadowing the family tie to Brook and such the entire time. Now, I won't confidently say that the One Piece is Joy Boy's Afro or anything like that, but I'm not saying that it isn't. Regardless, I do think that Luffy resonating with the Afro could have actually been hinting at this shared relationship between Brook and Luffy. Alright, so all of this so far is fun and dandy, but why do I think that Binks' sake and music could break Imu's mind control? Well, it's because music is the biggest thing that is tying Brook and Gungko together to begin with. She listens to and loves his songs, her flashback is full of music notes and music songs, and it's pretty obviously Brook's whole deal, right? So maybe he can use Binks' sake or just his music soul powers, the, song of their clan, to shatter the chains that bind her and free Gungko. And this would also tie into Gunko's name, actually. Now, in case you don't know, Gungko in Japanese is these two characters, which translates to Army Child, which was a big point, by the way, used for connecting her to the Revolutionary Army, Child of the Army, right? But there is another way that it can be written that reads as War Drum. The word Gungko literally means war drum, the instrument used to initiate a massive battle. And of course, Gungko, Luffy's mother, would be the quite literal war drum that Imu uses to initiate the final war, and the key to stopping her would be her son, who uses none other than the drums of liberation to free his mother and defeat Imu. And music being the key here also makes a ton of sense when you take into account that the attack that Scarpa used to stop the abyssal regeneration powers was Futenraku, which translates to Axe Heaven Music and was officially dubbed as Axe Symphony. And I do wonder if it's the pattern of music or the tempo at which attacks are dealt that could truly disrupt the abyssal powers here. I don't know, maybe it's not the music itself, but the signature or timing of the music that's actually defeating this weird supernatural power. Plus, I mean, come on, it's Scarpa Gaban, who is the only person we've seen use this power to disrupt this specific ability. The same Scarpa Gaban who knows what the One Piece is and came from Roger's crew, the same crew that blasted Binks' sake everywhere they went. I mean, I'm starting to really think there are two parts of this song that are important: the lyrics and the actual melody or rhythm. I kind of feel like the anime will really help make that clear though, because if the music part is important, we will definitely hear it during Scarpa's attack. Ultimately though, I do think this is all super important because Gungko being Luffy's mother will also open up Imu to an unpredictable weakness. As Harry Potter will tell you, the power of a mother's love. I mean, part of me just really does want to see Luffy head up to the Sun World and go, "Mom, cut it out," and everything completely break the way it did when Garp was revealed to be his grandfather and Dragon his father. But also, I do think there's a chance that Luffy being Gunko's son could awaken another memory and thus enable the crew to either free her or at least force Imu to retreat from Elbaf. Because let's face it, we already know that Daddy Brook has already shown this weakness in her mind, and maybe her son could be the final key to fully breaking free here. All I know is that this will be confirmed or denied pretty shortly because Monkey D. Dragon is making his move on Mariejua right now, and once we see him in action, I'm fairly confident we'll find out if he wants to get his wife back or not. But what I don't think we are all ready for is the massive consequences that this raid will have on the world. Dragon, you may have opened a huge can of worms here, and if you want to know what that is and how Blackbeard could take advantage of it all, check out this video right here where I break down Dragon's big move after 26 years of waiting for him to do something. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Thanks so much to all of our fantastic Patreon members. So much cool stuff over there. Check it out. And I will see you in the next video on Tuesday. We're talking hockey.